Niners today, the NFL has released its salary cap for 2024, and it is 255.4 million, a 13.6% increase over 2023. And perhaps even more notably, the largest single year increase in terms of sheer salary cap volume in NFL history, over $30 million larger than the $224.8 million 2023 limit. This is higher than anybody expected on the outside. It's a factor of the whole Taylor Swift thing, probably, and just growing NFL revenue, growing NFL interest. And also, there's some payback from the COVID years that is being paid to teams who were able to defer some of that money earlier on. So we've now seen the NFL catch up from its financial lull when the revenues weren't as great. We see the salary cap now at 255.4 million. So the 49ers can have some fun with extra money now. And to discuss how this 49ers roster might spruce itself up here over the course of the offseason, brought in a friend of the show, Lucas Siegel is here. Lucas, how's it going? We're going to say welcome back to Lucas, who's joining us, family friend from his dorm room in Washington, D.C. So you're out on the East Coast. Is it dark there yet? No. Yeah, no, not quite, right?
Yeah, we're coming up on 4 o'clock. We got a couple hours left of relative sunlight.
There you go. Well, how you doing, man?
Back. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
The 49ers, I mean, where were you watching the Super Bowl? Is that something you had to deal with on the East Coast with East Coast fans, obnoxious East Coasters?
So we had the obnoxious East Coasters, but then there's actually a kid who lives 3 doors down from me from Kansas City.
Oh, God.
So that was a hard one to look him in the eyes that night. Especially with my midterms coming up the week after, wanting to just kind of move on from the game. But, I mean, it's been the story of the last few years for the Niners, getting right there and then having various different ways to experience heartbreak.
Those of you who didn't see Lucas on the show, what was it? During the Warriors playoff run, right? So that would have been in May of last year. Family friend, obviously younger than me. He's in college right now, but reminds me a lot, or I would go back to when I first met you when you were like 5 or 6. Went over to your house and obviously was visiting with your parents, and you were sitting on the floor with San Francisco Chronicle newspaper, and you knew everything about the San Francisco Giants at like age 5. And I think you know a lot about the 49ers and you know a lot about the Warriors. And I'm like, damn, that was me when I was 5 years old. So anyway, we reconnected a couple of years ago, and I said, do you want to talk sports at some point? And last offseason was perfect because the Warriors and the 49ers were both in the news. The Warriors were on a run. Speaking of the Warriors, they got to win over the Lakers. I don't watch them much because I feel that they're very frustrating to watch this year. They seem to blow 20-point leads like it's their job. But just before we get to the 49ers really quickly, is there a chance for the Warriors to do something special this year, or have you punted on that too?
Honestly, I've gone back and forth. There have been moments throughout the season where when we're competing with teams like Denver or beating Boston at the Chase Center, where I think, oh my gosh, this team could do it. But there are just too many games where they're flat, where the defense hasn't been there. Although, honestly, I think you got to give them a little bit of time. We're just now kind of figuring out a rotation. Clay coming off the bench, Draymond back from suspension. Everything has to go right. And most of the time in sports, everything doesn't go right. But I think if everything goes right, there is a run to be had, especially when you have guys like Stephen Curry on your team still playing at the highest level. I think he's coming up on 36 next month, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it is. 36 years old, especially after I've been covering the NFL for 7 years now. 36 years old is ancient in the NFL. It's a young man's league. I think all pro sports, basketball too, it's going to favor younger players. But then you have some of the greats, Steph, LeBron. These guys are able to keep on doing it at a high level even as they get older. All right, so let's move on to 49ers talk. We let the room fill up here a little bit. 49ers are now going to be dealing with a salary cap of $255.4 million. Lucas, the first player that I asked you, who was on your mind, the first player that you thought of when you saw this higher salary cap was Jauan Jennings. The 49ers receiver who had a great Super Bowl, probably made himself some money during the Super Bowl, but he's going to be a restricted free agent this offseason. So the big question is, will the 49ers be able to keep him? Are they going to be able to, are they going to be willing to pay enough to keep him? And obviously this whole process is a little bit more complicated than an unrestricted free agent process, but I do think that it gives the 49ers a better chance to keep him. And I think that, based on what we talked about before we went live, you think it's important that they keep him in that building.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard sometimes to justify paying a third receiver money to stay on the team. But when you look at games like the Super Bowl, where I think for a while there, he had a shot at being the Super Bowl MVP, had things gone slightly differently at the end there. And not just in the Super Bowl, but for the last few years, third down, you need a big completion, you need a conversion. Who do you go to? It's pretty often going to be Jauan Jennings, and he gets it done. And he's been getting it done for a while. So I think this salary cap being 255.4, I think you said it was, is big for that, because obviously with the tenders, you can't spread the money out. But I think hopefully there's some wiggle room in that with that new salary cap to give him one of the tenders and keep him around, because I think he adds so much.
So they don't necessarily have to give him a tender. Last year, Colton McKivitz was a restricted free agent, and the 49ers ended up agreeing to a 2-year deal with Colton McKivitz. So this is not mandatory, but just to explain this to the viewers, these are their options with Jauan Jennings, who's the only restricted free agent this year. So this process won't apply to anyone else, but they can offer him a first-round tender, which means it's an offer for $6.8 million, but Jennings can still go and negotiate with other teams. If another team offers him more money or a deal that he likes better than that first round tender, he can sign with that other team and leave the 49ers, but they would get a first round pick in compensation for that. The 49ers would. They can opt for a cheaper second round tender, which would cost $4.9 million. Again, same process. If Jennings decides to sign elsewhere, the 49ers would get a second round pick in return. Or they can slap the original round tender on Jauan Jennings. It's much cheaper at $3.1 million. He was picked in the 7th round out of Tennessee, so they'd get a 7th rounder in return. The weakest tender is the right of first refusal. That would mean a $3 million tender. They would allow Jennings to go negotiate with other teams. They would, he could be offered, say, $4 million by somebody else. 49ers would have a chance to refuse and say, no, we're going to up our offer. We'll keep Jennings around. And that would at least give them the security to match any potential offers. But those are their 4 tender options with Jauan Jennings. Again, they could bypass all of this and they can agree to 2, 3, 4, 5-year deal if they want to with him. But I think that the key here, Lucas, is that Jennings is very, very important. You mentioned the fact that he's a third down weapon and just a key down weapon for the 49ers. On top of that, though, what about the mentality? I mean, I'm sure you saw the play where he was blocking that guy into the bench against the Detroit Lions. I mean, this is a bulldog on the field, and the 49ers seem to play a little bit differently than most teams when it comes to asking their receivers to be physical and to block.
Yeah, I mean, you have that culture that really comes down from Debo and Ayuk both being willing and able to make those key blocks and to spring McCaffrey free. And Jennings, I think, arguably does it better than both of them, at least in the blocking game. And when you have, in my opinion, the best running back in football, a shout for one of the best players in football in Christian McCaffrey, it's important to have the weapons and the personnel to let him be his best. And I think, as you said, beyond the glamorous stuff that he does, blocking guys into benches, converting third downs, Jauan Jennings, he's going to make the right play and he's going to help McCaffrey be better and whoever we have running the ball.
Yeah, so next year we could take a look at the roster right now because we're talking about a bigger salary cap. We're talking about the 49ers already having essentially all of their core from this season under contract for 2024. So the only question is, do they extend Brandon Ayuk or do they do something else with him? Because he already is under contract for next year. The only question, I think, is how do they spruce up this roster on top of what they already have? And you mentioned other runners for the 49ers. They also have a couple of those guys under contract. Here is the roster. Everybody can zoom in on this, check it out. But obviously the quarterback room has Brock Purdy in it, What happens behind him is still anybody's guess. But you were mentioning running back, and it's McCaffrey, it's Elijah Mitchell, who I think acquitted himself very nicely this season, fought through some more injuries, but was healthy by the end of it, and scored a huge touchdown, the ultimate winning touchdown in the NFC Championship game. Did that cold turkey, had to come off the bench with no warm-up time and delivered. That was a big play for the 49ers. Fans love Jordan Mason. He didn't get as much time this year, but he's still under contract. Ty Davis Price actually just signed with the Eagles. But as far as a running back room goes, you don't normally see one this deep, and that includes Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, at this point in the season, Lucas.
Yeah, I think it's great. Obviously, the last couple of years with McCaffrey, we haven't really had to go with the committee approach. But I think I remember reading a stat that there was something like 4 or 5 years in a row with a different leading rusher under Shanahan before McCaffrey came in, and having those options behind him where you feel confident putting the ball in their hands and still being able to run Shanahan's game plan is great to have, because there are no guarantees, especially at the running back position, as far as health goes in football.
I do have to ask you then, where were you at during the NFC Championship game when Elijah Mitchell scored that touchdown that put him up 34-24? Speaking of reliable options, this guy was not in the game at all. Hadn't seen a single carry. McCaffrey gets a little dinged up or is a little tired. I forgot what happened. I think he got a little dinged up, actually. And in came Elijah Mitchell, biggest moment of the season to that point, and he scored. And that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
It's not easy to bowl through 8 different bodies and make your way across the goal line. He did that, but just on a personal note, were you back on the East Coast watching that? And how crazy did you go?
I was. I've been back here for the whole playoff run, and a lot of my closest friends are either Bears fans, so they're just kind of sad during the playoffs, or Eagles fans. And so that was a fun rivalry to have, especially after Wild Card Weekend, where the Eagles went out and we hadn't even played a game yet. But I was actually watching the game in one of my friends' common rooms with a bunch of my friends, a lot of them Eagles fans. And when we went down 17-0, down by 17, I was hearing a lot from those guys and saying, "Oh, the Niners are done." And then all of a sudden that third quarter happens, culminated with Mitchell, and some of the guys didn't even know who he was. But by the end of that game, it was pretty clear that the Niners at least could come from behind, fight through adversity. And I was on my high horse thinking we were going to win the Super Bowl, talking to anyone who would listen. Unfortunately, I had to eat my words a little bit there, though.
Were you talking to the Kansas City fan too down the hall?
Oh, yeah. We were talking all day on Sunday. I think we both thought it was anyone's game. We both were talking, "Oh, we're going to win." But I think going into that game, I knew it was going to be a really close game, and I knew it was going to come down to execution in the fourth quarter. Didn't really consider overtime, but you can count that in there too. And I was right. It was an all-time classic game, and for a neutral observer, I'm sure was a great watch.
Yeah, I think neutral observers really thought that it kicked into gear after halftime, because neutral observers typically like offense, and the offense started showing up after halftime. The defenses got a little bit tired. 49ers lost Dre Greenlaw, which was huge. We can segue using that. Speaking of Dre Greenlaw, why don't we go down to the linebacker position for our next one to look at, because this is going to be really interesting given the larger salary cap. I think, now that there are about roughly $10 million more to play with than people initially thought, maybe that allows the 49ers to bring back somebody like Azeez Al-Shaair, who was on a 1-year deal with the Tennessee Titans. I think they really missed him this year, Lucas. Like, their third linebacker situation wasn't great. Yep. They had Oren Burks in that role, and Burks got torched in coverage after Dre Greenlaw exited the Super Bowl with the Achilles tear. The thing about the Achilles, and I mean, you follow the Warriors really closely. Obviously, they've dealt with a couple of those injuries, one to Klay Thompson, one to Kevin Durant a few years back. But the Achilles to a linebacker in the NFL, I think that's particularly brutal. It essentially ended Navarro Bowman's career. He was never the same after his. One thing I've been saying, though, is that Greenlaw is only 26. That's a big deal. Bowman was 28. I think those 2 years that Dre Greenlaw has, younger than Bowman was at the time of his tear, give him a much better chance of regaining close to full mobility. Either way, this rehab process can theoretically stretch into the regular season. And if it does, you've got Warner and you've got 2 rookies, D. Winters and Jalen Graham. I think that means it's almost imperative to add another veteran. And maybe they can bring back somebody like Aziz Al-Shire or even Quan Alexander, who's going to be available this offseason. A couple guys who used to play for this team.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what the Niners need right now, the things that stand out to me are figuring out what's going on at linebacker, even saying Greenlaw's back at 90% of what he was at some point in the regular season. You need a third guy, and I think our defense really revolves around our linebackers with the way we play, having them fly sideline to sideline, up and down the field. That's what has made, I think, our defense so great, backing up that front four. Even in years where we haven't had a great secondary, our defense has been great because of that entire front seven. So linebacker, finding a second cornerback that you can really, I think, rely upon, because I think there were times this year where guys who came in there had really great games and had great moments, but then there were some costly penalties and some teams that knew, yeah, we can't go at Charvarius Ward, but we're gonna be able to go elsewhere. And then the last one is the offensive line. I think you can't do much in football if you're not protecting your quarterback and creating holes for the running game. I think the passing game was the bigger issue this year. But I mean, there are a few obvious downs in the Super Bowl where the game could have gone differently. McCaffrey's fumble, the punt fumble, not a muff, but the punt fiasco, I guess you can call it.
Hit off.
And there were a couple times when Chris Jones was just free on Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy couldn't make the play that would have probably won the game.
Absolutely. There were actually 9 unblocked pressures via blitzes in that game. The 49ers just didn't pick them up. Sometimes you're going to have a designed free rusher and you go to the hot route. That's good. But there were a lot of undesigned free rushers in this game. And, you know, one of the plays that was a blitz, that was an unblocked free rusher, was Chris Jones. Jones wasn't blitzing. There was a blitz coming from elsewhere, but they just forgot to block Jones. That ended up being Spencer Burford's fault at right guard. And there just were too many protection issues in that football game, especially in retrospect. You say the 49ers might have lost that game by 1 play, right? Yeah. And when so many plays were derailed by unblocked pressure, ended up being an issue. I fully agree. I think offensive line, I've been talking about this for years now. I do not agree with people that say that they haven't invested at all in the line. I just don't think that they've invested enough in the line. Now, obviously, they paid Trent Williams record money in 2021. They drafted Aaron Banks with a second-round pick for the left guard spot. They signed Alex Mack, who obviously has since retired. I think it's the right side of the line that has posed the biggest issues for the 49ers. And this year, I think you continue pouring resources into it, whether it be draft capital for one of these. There's quite a few guards that should be available early in the draft who can also play center in the future. So maybe you draft somebody that might be able to start at right guard right away. He could shift over to center, or you see what happens on the free agent market. And we're still about 3 weeks away from that really crystallizing into fruition, from seeing who might be firmly available. But it does seem that protecting Brock Purdy is a prudent move moving forward, especially since you're projected to invest essentially the entire franchise in him come 2025 when he's up for a new contract. And that's big news right now. You look at Purdy, you look at the fact that he's going to be due a massive money next year. That's going to be the first year he's eligible for an extension. And you look at the fact that the cap is higher than we thought it would be, Lucas, and unused space carries over from year to year. 49ers are carrying over $38 million of unused space from 2023 to 2024. That's going to help them immensely this year. More unused space moving forward next year if it so happens, if they make the right restructures to make that work this year. So every million matters as far as when we look at the moment when this team does have to pay Brock Purdy, because they're going to be trying to keep as much of the core around him on this roster. So every million matters when it comes to that effort.
Yeah, I mean, Brock Purdy has shown last year and especially this year that he is the quarterback that Kyle Shanahan has been looking for years, that the 49ers have needed. I think he's not only raised the floor of this team, I think he's raised the ceiling of the team. He makes the right plays and he makes the spectacular plays. And he's going to obviously have to get paid next year. So I think I read it was 98 million is the maximum that we can create with restructuring, and as you said, every million of that is going to be huge for being able to play Brock Purdy, but pay Brock Purdy, but also having the guys that are around him right now and keeping them around him because as we saw with even Mahomes this year, when you don't have weapons, no matter how great you are, it's tough to be successful until you figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to want to keep the right mix of veteran star power, effective veteran star power around him with a youth infusion, right? You have to constantly be pumping youth into an NFL roster. And I think this 11-player draft class that the 49ers are going to be picking in a couple months is going to be one of the most important drafts of the Shanahan-Lynch tenure. Speaking of potentially good players for the 49ers, we got a question from Pat. Lucas, are you a potential cornerback? Are you that potential third corner? Can you play nickel for the 49ers? I know you were a star running back, right, in high school. I know there was some games where you scored a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
I don't know what you played on defense.
I played a little bit of safety on defense, but I was always more of an offensive guy playing football. But I'll see if I can put on 20 pounds, maybe bring my 40 down by 0.5 seconds, and then I'll be all set.
No problem at all. Half a second on the 40, piece of cake. Yeah, that's I think that's what we'd need, but that's what the 49ers would need. We'll see what goes there. Okay, anyway, that was a good question. I was double checking though. I did know that you played running back. I didn't know you played on defense. Safety, that's kind of like the quarterback of the defense, right? You're having to sit back there and you see everything from the bird's eye view at that safety position.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I was more of an offensive guy, but there were some times when I would go in to play safety, oftentimes actually kind of as a blitzing safety, coming down into the box and just having one assignment, run at the quarterback and see what you can do.
Let's move back to the roster. Actually, one piece of news right now. This is funny. I don't know if you saw this. Robbie Gould, the 49ers former kicker, has taken the high school coaching job at Rolling Meadows High School in Arlington Heights, a suburb of Chicago, over there by O'Hare Airport. That just happens to be Jimmy Garoppolo's former high school. So I did not have it on my bingo card, Lucas, for Robbie Gould to be coaching at Jimmy Garoppolo's old high school. But the Chicago connections with former 49ers right there, that reminds me of the old snow game at Green Bay. That's one where I want to ask you about that, the old snow game at Green Bay. Garoppolo obviously is the QB. Robbie Gould hit the game-winning kick in the snow. Where were you for that one? That's a great 49ers memory.
Where was I? I believe I was at home with my family watching that game. I tried to convince my dad to take me to Lambeau. Was unsuccessful in that attempt. But I remember watching that drive.
Negative 10-degree weather.
Exactly. Yeah, he would not have been happy. But I remember watching that game, watching that march down the field at the end, and you just felt Robbie Gould was going to make the kick, even though that was really, looking back on it, at the very edge of his comfortable range in that weather. And I think we saw the benefit this year of having a guy who could kick field goals from a little bit longer in the Super Bowl, and when Jake Moody nailed a field goal that Robbie Gould would not have dreamt of kicking by the end of his time with the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. Let's talk about special teams. And, Robbie Gould obviously never missed a playoff kick, but he didn't attempt many in the playoffs as long as the ones that Jake Moody attempted twice and made both of them in the Super Bowl, 250-plus yarders. There's a lot of heat on Jake Moody over the missed extra point. But it wasn't a clean miss. It was a block, first of all. Yeah. Obviously, the trajectory could have been higher, but it wasn't like he kicked it straight into the line. It was a good block from the Kansas City Chiefs. But he drilled those 250-plus yarders, including one in the clutch, which I think really illustrated what the 49ers wanted by infusing that kicker position with youth, right? And he was already an above average kicker his rookie year. Obviously, he missed a handful of kicks, but there were very few NFL kickers who didn't miss a handful of kicks. And I think that you can go all the way back to that game against Minnesota where he missed the shorter kick earlier on, but then late in the game, Kyle Shanahan trusted him with I think it was a 55 or 56 yarder, and Moody just drilled it. And I think at that point, the 49ers said, okay, this guy can fight through some adversity. This guy could make long kicks when we need him to. And they turned to him twice in that Super Bowl, and he made both. And to me, after overcoming some of the turbulence of his rookie year to do that, I think he can only get better, right, moving forward. And I don't know if he's going to become Robbie Gould, but there is more upside on the longer kicks than Robbie Gould, like you said, at the late stage of his career had with the 49ers.
Yeah, and there's not just that, but there's also the kickoffs, which had been an issue for the Niners for a couple years, figuring out touchbacks and kickoff coverage. Watching Jake Moody be able to hit it through the back of the end zone when asked to is another nice thing to see, because I mean,
we got news. The 49ers have released Isaiah Oliver, the nickelback. This is one of my predicted releases. Let me put you back up on the screen. I got to tweet this, but let me get this up on the screen. Sorry, we want to get it out to people. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No worries.
But this was expected. I don't know. He was benched earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the third cornerback. And the reason why the 49ers need another corner is because the nickel situation didn't work with Isaiah Oliver. I mean, the change of direction wasn't there. They wanted the bigger nickel. It was more of a Steve Wilkes guy, Isaiah Oliver was. And the bigger nickel spot didn't work out. They needed somebody that was shiftier, and they ended up benching Oliver, moving Deommodore Lenoir inside, and that created a vacuum at the second corner position, right? Ambry Thomas got picked on. So this is the first 49ers release of the offseason, and I think it's an expected one, obviously, but we can now talk about what they're going to do to try to fortify that cornerback position.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think hopefully there's that's something that's addressed in the draft. Obviously, with 11 picks, you have there are a few different areas that you can really try to fortify, because the fact that a guy who was signed off of a cruise in November was having more success than Isaiah Oliver, who really he was on $5 million a year last year. And
yeah, I could bring up his details really fast so I could tell you exactly how much they saved with this move.
But I mean, he was on a legit contract, expected to really fortify that position, and didn't do the job. So, especially once Wilkes was fired last week, I think this was one that was kind of bound to happen.
I am currently crafting a tweet about this. This move saves San Francisco $2.4 million in cap space. So they're going to face $1.46 million in dead money, but they do save on the aggregate $2.4 million. So this is it. I mean, that's another player. That's at this point, the ability between the salary cap increasing to $255.4 million and saving some money here by jettisoning Isaiah Oliver, who was benched. The 49ers have a lot more financial flexibility than they did when we woke up this morning.
Yeah. You texted me earlier today as we were preparing to get on here, asking if I'd seen the salary cap news. I'd seen it. I think it'd come out 30 minutes earlier or something like that. But when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about for the offseason and all the guys, 255 was not on my radar as far as a salary cap number, nor was it, I think, on even the most educated NFL fans, at least on the outside. So I think it's going to help a lot of teams, obviously, because more room means better ability to keep guys and get guys. But I think the Niners are in a unique position where this infusion of extra room can make a really big difference, not only for this year, but setting us up to be sustainable into the future.
So I almost got the tweet ready. I'm just trying to get it a little. Okay, here we go. Here we are. I'm going to tweet it right now. The 49ers have released nickelback Isaiah Oliver, which was expected following his benching early in the season. The defense simply needed better change of direction at the slot cornerback spot. Steve Wilkes' big nickel plan didn't pan out. This saves the 49ers $2.4 million in cap space. While we're at it, we can go ahead and make a live change to my salary cap sheet. This is the cool stuff about news breaking when we are live. Let's let people see this a little bit easier. There we go. So Isaiah Oliver is on the sheet right here. 3.87 million. He's going to incur dead money though, so I have to go check to see. What did I say? Like 1.6 in dead money? Let me look. 1.46 in dead money.
And then 2.4 saved, I think you said.
Yeah, 2.4 saved, and that will calculate on the sheet. So you remove that $3.8 million cap hit, and then you put him on the dead money list right here, and that adds up to 2.4 million saved. So 1.464, boom. So this is it's tough to calculate cap space. This confuses a lot of people, but those of you looking at the sheet now, I've adjusted the 49ers salary cap with the new cap number. I've added 38 million that they carried over from last year. And basically this is a projection of their 53-man roster, how much it's going to cost. It's not full yet. We have 40 out of 53 spots filled right now. They have 15.4 million left to fill the remaining 13 spots, but that's before they restructure anybody. You don't want to restructure too many people because then you could run out of room in future years. But basically the gist of it is they've got plenty of money to get this done. Because you look at stuff like Brandon Ayuk, he has a $14.1 million cap hit right now, but that's on his 5th-year option price tag. That's a 1-year fixed charge. You can extend him, which I think the 49ers will try to do, and actually lower that number because you could push the cap hits back later. So you don't even have to run a restructure to open up even more room. Somebody like Ayuk, you can open up more room just naturally through that.
Yeah, and you've talked about this for years, or not for years, I guess for 2 years now. Having this year with Brock Purdy as a $1 million cap hit opens up massive possibilities for the rest of the roster.
Yes.
It's not that often that you're paying a quarterback $1 million. Even your backup generally makes more than that. I think we paid Darnold, was it $8 million or something last year?
It was heavily incentive based. So I think it started at 4 or 5, and it could have gone all the way up to 13 or 14. So there was a big range. He probably ended up making about 5 or 6 out of that.
But having this year with that flexibility with Purdy, it's almost unheard of for an established top tier or like quarterback. You got all the other guys that you put in the conversation with Purdy when you're thinking about quarterbacks leading an offense are making many times more than him. Even rookies like CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, I'm not sure has proven to be great yet, but that's the beauty of that pick at the back of the draft there with Brock Purdy really being such a gold mine and saving the Niners from what could have been a dicey situation there with Garoppolo and Lance.
Yeah, it's staggering when you look at this sheet. $1 million. And then you've got hits like McCaffrey's is 14 times as large, but it's still dwarfed by something like Trent Williams at 31.7 million. So you could just see the financial flexibility you have because Brock Purdy is making so relatively little. All right, back to the bigger 49ers roster here. We've talked about the receivers. We've talked about the running backs. We've talked about Purdy. We've addressed the offensive line as well. Tight end is an interesting one because it's George Kittle and Braden Willis, who's a rookie, committed to that holding penalty on the 49ers' final drive. I think they definitely need to find a way to spruce up the tight end position. It might be by bringing Ross Dwelly back, but they've been long looking to improve that position further, get the number 2 behind Kittle. Being more productive. Somebody like Cam Latu, who was dropping a bunch of passes in the training camp before he went on IR, he's going to get another shot at this next year. So we'll look to see what the 49ers do there. But I think, you're a football purist, Lucas. Having 2 tight ends that are capable of catching the ball is something that's really hard to defend, right? Because those guys can catch the passes and they can also block. And it makes it hard to defend an adaptable offense.
Yeah. I mean, obviously George Kittle is, in my opinion, the best pure tight end in football. Kelsey doesn't, in my opinion, really play tight end. He's a big receiver for the most part. But having George Kittle is awesome there. But you never know if he's going to be 100% healthy. And adding one more weapon to your offense with a guy that is probably not going to be a focal point of the defensive coverage, no matter how good he is, it's great. You see Juszczyk makes big receptions because he gets forgotten about sometimes. And having a guy who can one, change your personnel and block, and two, make big catches, especially in the red zone where tight ends are so valuable, or on third down, those big downs where you need a few yards. It's something that we've lacked for a few years now. I ever since Kittle has really taken off.
Yeah, they tried to get it with Jordan Reed back in 2020, but that was an injury flyer, and he ended up being injured. So it was one of those things. It's hard to afford two really good tight ends. So it's just, usually you're going to have a higher paid veteran, and that's what George Kittle is right now with a guy on a rookie deal. And they're hoping that maybe Braden Willis can continue to develop into that. Maybe Cam Latu can take another step next year following the year of rehab and a year to really get into the playbook. Maybe he'll be more confident out on the field. We won't see as many drops. There is a developmental curve for anybody who enters the NFL. We have talked about the secondary, the linebackers. We got one more position group here. And that final position group, and I'll open up the roster one more time, is the one that the 49ers have traditionally invested the most in over the course of this regime, and it is the defensive line. Nick Bosa had another fine year, especially after he knocked off some of that rust following the holdout. There are a lot of questions about what the 49ers might do elsewhere. Eric Armstead, when he has played, and I know that he missed some time again this year, but he played hurt also in the Super Bowl, played with a torn meniscus. But when he's played, he's a force. He's a game changer. And he played a good Super Bowl for San Francisco. So did Javon Hargrave, who played the Super Bowl with a torn thumb ligament. The one player you don't see on here, notably, because he's not under contract, at least as of yet for 2024, is Chase Young. And speaking of making some money in the Super Bowl, I don't know what you thought of Chase Young in the Super Bowl, but to me, he flashed off the screen. The problem is that he didn't flash off the screen nearly as much as he did in the Super Bowl in the games prior to that. Maybe that's a good thing for the 49ers. Maybe that means they'll be able to retain him combined with this salary cap increase on a cheaper deal for a year. But I think they definitely need somebody opposite Bosa, because this defense is monstrous when that is the case.
Yeah, I was really excited when I heard about Chase Young coming. It gave me hopes that we could have a 2019-esque defensive line where you feel like you're pressuring the quarterback almost every time they're dropping back into a longer drop, and just disrupting the flow of the other team's offense. We didn't see that consistently enough. I think Bosa's season was overhated by people who just look at the sack numbers. He was a lot better than 10.5 sacks, even when he was working off the rust. He forced offenses to game plan for him and open things up for everyone else. We forget about it, but I think Drake Jackson had what was it?
3 sacks in week one. Yeah, he had 3 sacks in week one. A lot of that because of the attention that Bosa and everybody was taking. You're exactly right.
But having guys that can consistently capitalize on those one-on-one matchups is really the name of the game for that defensive line, because no matter who you sign, Nick Bosa is going to command a lot of double teams, a lot of eyes on him, and that's going to open up opportunities for other guys to make plays. In the Super Bowl, we saw Chase Young do it, but as you said, just didn't do it regularly enough throughout the season. And I think that was an under-acknowledged part of why our defense took a step back in 2023.
Our guy Brad, who runs the SF Niners Twitter account, like a fan Twitter account, I have to find his Twitter, because he's big on the bring Brian Burns to San Francisco train. It's almost become a little bit of a meme, a little bit of a joke. It's like, okay, they're probably not going to have enough money to pay Brian Burns. You never say never. The 49ers, I mean, I know that you weren't alive yet, but early 1990s, they had to overcome the Dallas Cowboys, and they did it by stacking up on free agents, Ken Norton Jr., Deion Sanders. Now same situation. You just have to overcome the Kansas City Chiefs. It might be something where the 49ers, like the 2021 Rams, just push all their chips into the middle of the table and say, hey, this is it. Let's go for it. But so anyway, you can't firmly rule out anything, but I want to, he had this funny graphic that he put up because he felt that the salary cap increase meant that the pursuit of Brian Burns was back alive. So I'm trying to find it here on Twitter. We'll shout out to our guy, Brad. Where is it? Here. Here it is. This is funny. I think this will get a chuckle out of you. Put this up on the screen. There he is. I guess D. Winters would have to give up his number if that happened. D. Winters would have to move from 53, but I think he would happily do that. The 49ers were able to pair Nick Bosa with this. Would be crazy. Wouldn't be unprecedented. I mean, crazier stuff has happened in NFL. The Rams were able to get Von Miller in 2021. I know that was a midseason trade. It wasn't a free agent signing, but this new salary cap information that we have covered today, the rise to $255.4 million, should theoretically give the 49ers a lot more maneuverability than initially expected.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an offseason with a couple goals. One, as we talked about, reinforcing with those guys you can plug in and fill gaps and aren't going to make mistakes. And then finding one or two game changers, whether it's via the draft or free agency, or re-signing Chase Young and hoping that he is that game changer. But I think if we accomplish those two things, where we just get slightly more solid in a couple places, and then find one or two guys that are going to make plays and be guys you buy their jersey and you watch them change games on Sundays, that's the blueprint. It's a lot easier said than done, but that's the blueprint to finally getting over the hump and winning the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, getting to the Super Bowl and kicking the door down to win it. I think that's what the 49ers want to do. Well, thank you, Lucas. Everybody, welcome back to Lucas. Those of you joining late, friend of the show. He's going to be on more often. We had him on a few times last year because he gave some good Warriors expertise too. And now he's in college over at Georgetown. So we have an East Coast correspondent now. Can let us know about how obnoxious all those East Coasters were after they saw the 49ers lose. 49ers don't seem to be very liked outside of their own fan base. And
yeah, I had a lot of friends joking to me, because a lot of people also don't like the Chiefs. I had a lot of friends joke that their ideal Super Bowl result was a power outage, canceling the game or anything like that. And I got to sit back and watch.
Well, hey, next year the 49ers go back to New Orleans. It's still the same stadium that had a power outage in the last Super Bowl. So maybe you foreshadowed something. That would be a hell of a, against Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers next year in New Orleans. Maybe that's what needs to happen for the 49ers to finally close the circle.
I unfortunately just don't see the Chiefs getting knocked off their AFC pedestal. They find a way to win.
Yeah, they do. But that being said, even the dynastic 49ers that went 5-0 in Super Bowls lost a lot of really tough NFC championship games. And the Chiefs they've already lost an AFC championship game, right? They lost to the Cincinnati. They lost twice. They lost to Brady and the Patriots, and they lost to the Bengals and Joe Burrow. I would really look out for Cincinnati if Burrow's healthy. I think that's obviously the one active QB who's beaten Mahomes in the playoffs. And if even the Niners of the 80s at the height of their power were losing NFC championship games, there were a couple losses to the Giants in there, then I think the Chiefs can lose there too. I personally want to see the end, the full circle ending to the 49ers Chiefs story. And similar to what we saw with 49ers Cowboys in the 1990s, the 49ers finally got Dallas their third try. I just want to see the 49ers get a third try because I think, I covered this story, and that would be the story, right? That would be that's like if the NFL had a script. I think that's what the NFL would want to see. Well, maybe not anybody outside of Kansas City and San Francisco. But if you're a football fan, those are the two best teams right now. And there's a really good chance they'll be the two best teams next year.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you to Lucas. Thank you to everybody for watching. We got a surprise episode coming up a little bit later tonight, so everybody stay tuned for that. It won't be too long from now. I got two more that I'm doing tonight, but one more surprise guest. I'm sure that you'll like her. We'll talk about it very soon. Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.